Hello, this is Dr. Jacqueline with DTP Leadership Group. This is Hot Topic Bold Talk. Podcast 111 is about healing the divide we have in America, moving beyond election obsessions and holiday negativity. How do we get past the negativity and also the election about holidays? How do they impact each other? So I want to talk about first processing the election emotions and talking about pathways I've found that I think are really meaningful and ways to deal with them because I'm practicing them myself. So they're things that I've learned over the years, and so I'm going to give this in this particular podcast. But I know there are families that have members of families that do not like the holidays. They didn't like them when they were a child or adolescent, and they don't like them as adults. And they can certainly become very difficult when there's an election that they're not very happy about. And so combining the election dislike that they have and then the holiday dislike, it can be a really miserable holiday. And so I want to talk about how to address both and be able to do some things in talking to that individual member of the family, because they have to first process their feelings about the election that's just happened, and then they need to process their feelings about what happened in their past. And I've worked with a number of people that really needed that kind of thing because the family that they grew up in. I first want to address the election because there's Jennifer Roman from the Washington Post has done an excellent job in an article that she calls "Stop Obsessing About the Election and Start Talking to Fellow Citizens." And she talks about in this article that, there's so much information that's come from the Washington Centrex world that is focused inward and not paying attention what's out there. And that's what has brought us to not having an understanding about how people really live and what's going on. And I think it's important for you to hear what she has to say in some of her quotes, so I will read them to you, because I think she has a great idea about what we need to consider, no matter what political party we're a part of. Understandably, in the wake of a stunning national election, sources of media outlet, pundits, and politicians have turned their attention to dissecting the results, attempting to explain the decline of democratic norms and civic virtue, exploring the right-wing media ecosystem, analyzing the Democrats' problems, and delving into dozens of other topics. Some of this is necessary, she says, and valuable for politicians planning for future campaigns and for think tanks that are trying to devise new ways of doing things. But she also says, we've got to come to some sense of humility about what's going on. And politician insiders and observers need to be talking to people like you and me and people that we don't know real well. And she goes on to say sometimes individual things, for example, the FBI director James B. Comey's intervention before the 2016 election will be decisive in an election. Sometimes the accumulation effects of enormous trends, such as a globalization or inflation, will move the electorate just enough to determine the outcome. Qualifying the significance of any single event, though, she says, is impossible. So we must realize that in order to govern, we need to fully understand what's going on in the lives of people beyond Washington and outside the purview of the national media coverage. And she says, the media, the politicians, the think tanks need to examine the results of the national decision on individual lives and communities. That's where we're going to find what happened. What had happened with the individual lives in the communities. And she gives an example. For an example, Americans began to understand the stories of individual women and the effects that they were having on individual women in states that banned abortion. So it became very clear. It was very enlightening, and it was horrifying what was happening to women. I'm still going to live in a state that does that. And it's horrifying what's happening. But the results showed that there were a number of passages of abortion access support in red states, because it became a statement of a revulsion against extremism that had impacted the lives of women. So she says, let's look and see. Let's not have empty rhetoric about things. Let's understand what is going on, because we can see that these bans had effects on individual women, their families and communities and workplaces, or on the medical schools and the medical professionals more generally. And that sort of information brought an analysis which is not obtained in a 30-second soundbite and a cable news. It's obtained by really going out and researching it. She says the researchers and reporters and think tankers and policymakers need to get out of Washington and take a look at the impact on hospitals, daycare centers, and classrooms throughout our country. What personal stories have we got to look at that refute the data that we seem to have that totally missed what was going to happen in this election? And she said conversations are essential because they may lead us to solutions. And she asked all of us to look at some specific things. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested in infrastructure and chip manufacturing and green energy. But how much do we know that there's been a really positive impact on the communities? Are there workers that got hired, or those that didn't get hired? Are their families being impacted because they weren't included in some of these major projects? And she said the basic questions are, in the income and mental health in these areas, we need to look carefully and closely at what has happened. And who are these people that are left behind? Who are those that did not find meaningful work? Where is a place for them in our communities in improving their self-worth despite these massive investments? What do we do with these massive investments? What has been the impact on American people? Now, she said we need to have endless discussions, because we had endless discussions with the pandemic. What was the impact on the mental health of our children and the way education was carried out? What happened to children as a result of it? Did it affect all classes, races, and genders? Maybe we haven't gone far enough to really look at what happened. We need to address these issues. We need to talk with people whose lives are unfamiliar to us. We need to start understanding what our real audience is in America and gather stories from the American people. And I think there's a sadness I have, which she mentions as well, that there is a decline of local media that is truly tragic. And we don't have enough investigative journalists now to really bring forth the truth, unless our national outlets for news that have the resources to do something about it connect with citizens and journalists in local communities. And they are still there. We need to connect with them, she said. Now, I think one of the things she points out that I think is really important is the filmmakers, the artists, the novelists, the nonfiction writers, and the playwrights have given us very vivid portraits of life in America. So where are they? What's going on? And Americans who don't live like us, think like us, read the same media, or listen to the same voices that we do. What are they saying to us? This may not lead to winning the next election, and it may if we study these things. But there will be a greater sense of shared experiences if we know what the differences are. And in that process, maybe we can develop empathy for each other. Maybe we can find shared experiences we've had and be empathetic and converse in ways that will help us understand our neighbors more and to broaden our understanding of what they enjoy, what are they challenged by, and where do they need assistance. So I think she has some very good things to think about in letting go of the election results and start really investigating, getting to know various people that we know that have different opinions from ours and see what is really there and go from a very empathetic place when we have these conversations. Now, I want to go to also those people that not only have negative positions about the election, there are also people who just flat don't like holidays. And I've had a bunch of them, and the wife or the husband come in and say, I don't know what her problem is, or I don't know what his problem is, because he just hates holidays, or she doesn't like them, and she doesn't even want to do something for the kids. Here's what happened with most of them that I've talked to and that I've worked with. They grew up in exceedingly difficult times during the holidays. They had parents who were alcoholics or drug addicts or workaholics or other addictive patterns that contributed to holidays being very painful and miserable. And so they were a major disappointment with these adults that were children at the time. And so they don't like holidays. Another reason they hate it is they hate going home. Since the holidays are not relaxing, and since the adults still drink and they get into fights, and it's scary for the children, and so these memories have to have a processing through the emotions about them so that they can move beyond them. I'm thinking of a number of stories I've heard where kids would hide under their beds and stay together as a brother and sister because their parents were screaming and yelling in the kitchen below. And it was really scary when all that kind of thing happened. Now, another thing I want to point out is there are parents who are workaholics. And if they can't go to work, then they are snappy, they're irritated, and they're wanting people to let them go to work and not even have to deal with the holidays. And I was a workaholic for many years. Work was the thing I thought about every morning when I got up, and it was the thing I went to sleep with, and it was the thing I took on vacations. So I know how I acted when I couldn't do the things I thought were there. And so there are many workaholics that need to be in recovery and work on themselves. Now, these three examples are the reasons they don't find fun and enjoyment in a lot of things. And I think people hold on to these experiences and they carry them into their adult life. They could repeat the same kind of experiences because they're creating negativity about the holidays. And so they keep doing that, and they don't resolve what their adult relationships are with their families that they lived in the past. And I think it creates a lot of things for a child or adolescent or young adult as they grow older and they attempt to build relationships. They stay judgmental and unhappy about the holidays, and unfortunately, their kids begin to experience the same thing they had in childhood, even though the person may not drink, because of the negative things that they have not resolved. This same group of people often are going to be in a place where they grew up in holidays that created greater problems. And so they have not found ways to set boundaries with their families. So a lot of times they don't want to go to where their families are. they've changed their behavior. They don't want to participate in the old behavior they see in their families. And so they don't want to be associated with it because they're frustrated and disgusted. So they may not want to go join the family. And you have to understand that they have a conscious awareness of how their past was, and they don't want to participate in it again. Now, here are some things that I would make suggestions to you about when you're dealing with someone that's in a negative place, or when they have had experiences in their past that have flat prevented them from enjoying the holidays. When there's alcoholism or drug abuse in the home, or even workaholic behavior and a lot of things like that, kids need to learn how to use the phone to call for help if something really drastic is occurring in their household. And they need to know that they can ask for help from an adult at school or a family member who lives differently from the parents, or have the ability to have a phone at 5 or 6 and call 911 for help. And family members need to be conscious of that. I think of a story that has been told to me several times by adult individuals. They went to a family member, and the family member just told them they had to go back home, that they couldn't come live with them. They wanted to leave their home, but they weren't allowed to because the person they connected with, flat, was not going to take responsibility for them. When a relative does that, then it places the child in a very difficult situation. The least they can do is have it investigated, so that, and I know they might not want to stir up that kind of thing, but the children need to have ways to deal with the difficulties they're experiencing. And I think it's important for family members to seek help. Anyone that's a professional like myself in the mental health business or the medical field, or school personnel or churches or other organizations, are responsible for making certain that we deal with these kind of situations. And please know, neighbors are just as capable of doing things with these situations as any one of the professional groups that I talked about. Now, let's talk about the problems, the ones that hate holidays, the problems of really going home to the parents or a family gathering during the holidays. It may be the economy, it may be the election, it may be the politics that have polarized family units. And long, drawn-out difficulties are not something that are easily resolved in already tense situations. If the family does not have the skills to resolve these differences, then the conflicts are going to continue during the holidays. And I have some specific suggestions for anyone that's in that situation. Plan ahead. Think of neutral topics of conversation that you're willing to talk about. Resolve to not eat or drink things that are not good for you. Schedule walks alone. Decide when you will leave and stick to your plan. Another thing that you can do is arrange with your friends at home to have you call them so you can stay in contact with the everyday life that you truly enjoy. And while you keep yourself invested in focusing on things you have at home, you can also have a better sense of what you're doing with your family and feel more comfortable, and you probably have less resentments and find it easier to maybe have some things that you enjoy with them. And if it becomes extremely difficult, then you need to have the right to leave and know that's acceptable too. No matter what guilt trip they put out, just stop and say, what is the best thing for me to do right now? Because I've already experienced this as a child and adolescent. I'm an adult now. What do I need to do? Some people are in recovery programs. So let your family know that you'll be going to meetings and be clear that this is very important to you. And recovery meetings are different in various towns or cities, but they normally have a very familiar format And so you'll be able to feel more comfortable because you're in a familiar place. Well, no matter what town or city you're in. Also, it's great to go to recovery meetings because there'll be others talking about what their issues are and how they're trying to focus on things to be more positive when differences of opinion occur. Another thing I suggest is bring part of yourself to the family gathering, your favorite pie, your vegetable dish, or other things that may be a part of your food plan that your family do not eat. I don't eat refined sugar, flour, and wheat, and I have eliminated my allergies and other physical challenges I have. So I bring food, and my friends know that, and they're not insulted. They know what the benefits have been for me to not eat refined sugar, flour, and wheat. And I have wonderful food for the holidays. I've made some adjustments in the way I make dressing or some other things that really makes it enjoyable. I also want you to remember that as an adult, you do have a separate identity from your parents. And if someone gets hostile with you and comments that have a different perception of the economy or the election or politics or other topics, then remove yourself from it. And I suggest to people that they talk to the family members that do that ahead of time and say, look, I'm not staying if you get into this stuff. Because this is not a time to make really hostile, cutting remarks. And sarcasm is belittling. And so I'm asking you to respect me and respect the others that are going to be there that don't have the same position as you. If you want to talk about those subjects, then call your friends and talk about them that have the same concepts and ideas. So it may, if you set all these boundaries or you set some of them or only one of them, it may allow you to be more involved with your family and to have some way to deal with their particular behaviors or attitudes or beliefs. And I want to go in more into setting boundaries and really detaching with love. Parents are people. And after you're an adult, then it's time to separate yourself enough that you can be who you are as a human being. And setting boundaries is a way to do that. The greatest gift of Al-Anon, a program for family and friends of alcoholics, is the program teaches you to detach yourself, to be able to make the best decisions for yourself. If I were describing detachment, it would mean that I separate myself out from the other person. I don't distance myself from them and still get invested in what they're saying. I separate myself out from it and find ways that I can be respectful enough to set the boundaries I need to when they start saying something. My father was a challenge when he was alive, particularly after he had 2 heart attacks. And he would lapse into periods of sarcasm and very critical statements. And I began to say things before he ever came to visit me. I do not participate or support someone being sarcastic like you are. And I gave him the definition of sarcasm. It means cutting the flesh. And I said, sarcasm stops any kind of meaningful interaction between you and me. And it prevents us from building a caring relationship with each other. So I'm telling you now, I'm not going to get invested in sarcasm because it hurts the person that's saying it, whether you know it or not. It's hurting you, Dad, and it's also hurting me. And that's true for both of us. So one of the things that I've learned is to make it very clear. And I had a conversation with him one day, and I said, you know, you and I share. We each have the right to our own opinions and our own thoughts. And then we receive various forms of feedback from the other. Now, criticism, the way you do it, and what I've described to as sarcasm, is not feedback. So if you're going to eat your mean pills, which means that you're sarcastic, you're critical, and you're demeaning of what I'm doing, then I'm going to stop you. And I'm going to say you need to end the behavior because I will ask you to leave and go home early. So I ended up several times having said, Dad, you've eaten your mean pills. I suggest you go back in your room and decide what you're going to do because I'm not listening to these comments. One year he would not stop. And I was furious and I walked out of the house and went for a walk. When I came back, he continued to make some comments and I called my neighbor and told him to pick him up and take him to the airport. Now, he finally did get the message. But the problem was that he really did not want to hear what I was saying. But he finally got it. He finally realized that he wasn't going to have a relationship with me and he wasn't going to be able to come visit if he couldn't stop some of the critical things. And I even said to him, look at the things I've accomplished. I've built a business. I've done all this. I've taken you to my new office. I've done all the things that you as an entrepreneur wanted me to do as an entrepreneur. And so it is time to let go and move on. Now, I've been coaching people for years on how to do things differently during the holidays. And so I can tell you that I'm very good at helping people process the feelings they've experienced as a child and then move on to a different perspective. So if you want to contact me, you can contact me at my telephone number, 713-202-6884. Again, 713-202-6884. And please leave me a message because I don't answer calls immediately that I don't have the name or the number in my phone. But I will answer if I hear a message from you. Another thing is, if you'd like to contact me, you can contact me at my email, Jacqueline, JACKALYN, at D like dog, T like Tom, P like Paul, leadership.com. Now, I wrote an article in December 21st, 2020. It was entitled Person Who Never Liked Holidays. So you may want to look that article up because it is still on LinkedIn. That's what I've taken most of these suggestions from. And so I just wanted to let you know that there may be some things that I left out that still may be in the original one. So I want to end this podcast by saying we've explored the interplay of two profound challenges: navigating post-election emotions and addressing holiday negativity stemming from very difficult family dynamics of the past. And I think it's important to understand that these issues and taking proactive steps, whether through conversations, setting boundaries, or seeking personal growth through getting professional help, like someone like me, we can create more harmonious relationships and redefine these experiences. Each small action, from reaching out to a neighbor to re-imaging what holidays and traditions are, to contribute to the healing from both ourselves and our communities. I understand this journey is complex, but it is very simple when we utilize empathy and efforts and allow perspectives to be presented, whether they're different or not. Because we can see what's different and we may find commonality, which will lead for a really peaceful connection, even though we have differences of opinion. I hope this helped you this evening. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. And I'd love to hear from you if these suggestions are helpful. Thank you so much for listening.